The sun in Lagos hadn't changed much in the 8 weeks he'd been gone. It still blazed with the same arrogant intensity, and traffic still roared through the streets like it owned the city. But for Laurel Adams, the day felt heavier than most. Her boss, her Collins Okoro, was returning today. Not just any boss, not just any man. Collins was the reason she woke up every day excited to go to work, and now he was coming back after 8 long weeks in South Africa. Laurel adjusted the collar of her fitted cream blouse and tapped away on her keyboard, pretending she wasn't aware of the excitement echoing from the floor below. The staff had organized a small welcome party for him downstairs, balloons, snacks, and some music. She hadn't gone. She knew him better than any of them. Collins didn't care for noise or show. He was a man of order, of routine, of subtlety. Just like her. For the past 2 years, she had worked as his personal secretary at Okoro Builds, his thriving construction company, and she was damn good at it, handling receipts, clients, meetings, callbacks, even emails meant for him personally. While he was away, she held it all together like it was second nature, because somewhere in her heart she believed maybe someday Collins would finally look beyond her polished reports and efficient calendar reminders and see her. The elevator dinged softly behind her, and her stomach tightened. He was here. She didn't look up immediately. She heard his voice, deep, warm, tired, in the distant clinking of glass from a toast someone forced him into. Footsteps, murmurs, laughs. Then silence. He was coming upstairs. Laurel's hands froze on the keyboard. Her heartbeat betrayed her calm face. She sat straighter, like a student called to reciting class. She heard his steps approach, then the quiet swoosh of his office door opening and shutting. She stood, smoothed her skirt, grabbed her notepad and pen, and walked briskly to his door. A soft knock, then she entered. He was by the window, back turned, looking down at the city skyline. Even from behind, he looked tired. His tailored jacket was still flawless, but his shoulders seemed weighed down by something more than jet lag. "Welcome back, sir," Laurel said, her voice composed, professional. He turned, and the sight of him punched the air from her lungs. Collins Okoro was easily the finest man she'd ever known. Tall, dark, with a calm confidence that made people respect him before he even spoke. His neatly trimmed beard framed a jawline that was all business, and his eyes, deep, tired, but still sharp, met hers with a flicker of appreciation. "Laurel," he said with a small smile, "of course you didn't come to the party." "You hate parties," she replied smoothly. He chuckled. "You know me too well." "I try, sir." He walked to his desk, dropped his briefcase, and sighed. 8 weeks felt like a year, but I knew you'd hold everything down. "You trained me well, sir." He gave her a long look. There was something in it, almost a softness, but before she could read into it, he dropped the bomb. "I'm engaged," he said. Just like that. She blinked. Her heart paused, then skipped erratically. "I'm getting married in 2 months. You're the first to know." Laurel swallowed hard. "Congratulations, sir." He didn't seem to notice the catch in her voice. He continued, almost casually. "That was why I extended my stay. I met her in Cape Town. Her name's Alice. She's from Tanzania, and I spent most of the trip with her. Even flew to Dodoma to meet her family and ask for her hand." Laurel couldn't speak. All she could do was nod, every breath in her chest starting to feel like glass. Alice, Tanzania, marriage. She wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was a soft, "You must really care about her." "I do," Collins said. "She's graceful, intelligent, comes from a wealthy background. She reminded me what it feels like to have peace." Of course, she thought bitterly. Wealth recognizes wealth. Peace doesn't come in second-hand shoes or evening bus rides from Surulere. He stared at her a moment longer. "You haven't congratulated me properly," he said with a hint of teasing. "Do you disapprove?" She shook her head, composing herself quickly. "Sir, it's not my place to approve or disapprove. You just caught me by surprise." "Well then," he said with a proud smile. "Thank you. When's the date, sir?" We're looking at the end of the second month from now. But first, I want to buy a bigger house. Alice won't approve of the apartment I live in now. Laurel nodded slowly, trying to steady her hands. I want something grand, he continued, with a large garden, plenty of space. She grew up rich, and I'd like to give her that lifestyle again. Wouldn't she prefer to choose the house herself? She left it to me, Collins said, shrugging. But I'm leaving it to you. Laurel's heart twisted, but her lips held steady. Understood, sir. She trusts my taste, and I trust yours. She forced a smile. Then I'll get started immediately. Just let me know the specifications. He handed her a paper with scribbled notes. This is what I've envisioned. Make it happen. Laurel took it with a nod. Of course, sir. As she turned to leave, she hesitated, just for a second, at the door. Her hand lingered on the knob. Her lips parted, then closed again. There was nothing more to say. Nothing she was allowed to say. So she walked out, heels clicking softly on the tiled floor, back straight, head high, like a good secretary should. But her heart was crumbling with each step. Laurel Adams hadn't slept much the night before. Her mind kept spinning, turning over floor plans and furniture catalogs, contractor contacts and price quotes. Since Collins returned, things hadn't been the same. Maybe they'd never been. Maybe it was her heart that had changed, now bruised from watching the man she silently loved plan a life with someone else. Still, work was work, and she never let personal feelings ruin her professionalism. By midday the next day, she had already made a dozen calls and viewed multiple properties across Lagos Island, but it was the last house she saw in Victoria Island that made her pause. It stood quietly behind a tall black iron gate, cream exterior, smooth tile roof, and a layout that felt like it breathed with elegance. The living room stretched wide with warm sunlight flooding through arched windows. There was a small built-in library tucked under the staircase. Collins would love that. The kitchen was large with open shelving and marble counters that gave it a bright, airy feel. Up the staircase, 6 spacious bedrooms branched off. The master suite overlooked a lush garden full of hibiscus and orange lilies. Laurel could already picture him standing by that window in the morning, sipping tea. Her throat tightened. She didn't need to hesitate. She called him immediately. Sir, I think I found it. When he arrived, he stepped through the front door with slow, measured strides. He looked around with a face that was unreadable, neither thrilled nor displeased. Laurel watched him closely, trying to read something, anything, in his expression. What do you think, sir? She asked. Collins glanced at her, then took a deep breath. It's all right. It has potential, but it needs some work. Laurel's stomach sank. I'm sorry you don't like it, Mr. Collins. I'll continue the search. No, Laurel. He turned to her gently. It's all right. Alice would love this. She's young and all. I just want her to enjoy it. She swallowed and nodded. How old is she, if I may ask? 23, he said simply. Laurel blinked. That was a year younger than her. Oh, she murmured. He noticed her hesitation. What is it? Is she too young? She is to me, she said before she could stop herself, then quickly added, and I'm just 25. He raised his brows. Really? I thought you were older. Laurel gave him a look. None taken, sir, though I've had better compliments. He laughed. It was deep, warm, familiar, and it made her heart ache. They walked out to the car, the silence between them stretching like thread pulled too tightly. When they reached the driveway, he turned to her. Let me drive you home. Laurel hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. The moment they were in the car, her senses were flooded with him. His clean cologne, the commanding ease of his driving, the way his left hand rested confidently on the wheel. Every part of him was perfect. Too perfect. She found herself watching him more than the road. His jawline flexed when he concentrated. His shirt stretched slightly over his chest as he maneuvered a turn. His profile, shadowed by the fading sun, was unfairly beautiful. When they reached her apartment, she didn't want to get out. Thank you for bringing me home, Mr. Collins, she said softly, stepping out of the car. He smiled at her, boyish and genuine. Thanks for finding me a home. And then he drove off. The next morning, Laurel was early to the office. The sun had barely risen, but she wanted to bury herself in work. She didn't want to think about weddings or Tanzanian brides or flower-covered gardens. As soon as Collins arrived, his voice called her into the office. Laurel, he said the moment she stepped in, Alice gave me the go-ahead to design the house however I want. I'm handing it over to you. She blinked. All of it? He nodded. Every detail. I trust your judgment. She took a seat, opened her notebook, and began jotting down every alteration he mentioned. Private bathrooms for all bedrooms, a separate servants' wing, a large garage for 4 cars, a nursery suite with bright walls and safe corners. She barely looked up as her pen flew across the pages. When he was done, her notepad was filled. She glanced at the mess of notes and sketches and scribbles. It was a lot. It felt overwhelming. But she would do it. She had always done the impossible for him. Collins leaned back in his chair. Also, I won't be in on Monday. Her head snapped up. Sir? Alice is flying in. I'll be picking her from the airport and showing her around Lagos. Laurel nodded slowly until something struck her. Sir, you have the board meeting with the directors on Monday. You never miss those. He waved his hand. Tell Jide to handle it. Laurel's eyes widened. Collins Okoro never delegated board meetings, ever. I just need some time to myself, he said quietly. I want to enjoy life too. Leisure, as they say. Laurel looked at him for a long moment. Then softly, her voice trembling, she said, I understand, sir. You deserve some time. There was a pause, a big one. And I've been thinking, she said suddenly, it's a pity to spend all this time behind a desk. I've always wanted to travel, see the world. He looked up confused. You're going on vacation? No, I want to resign. His brows drew together, stunned. Laurel, I want to give you my notice, sir, she said, eyes lowered. I'd like to leave as soon as possible. Silence filled the room like smoke. He didn't speak for almost 5 full minutes. I thought you enjoyed working with me, he finally said. I do, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I need to do this for myself. The words stung, but she had to say them. She couldn't keep watching him prepare for a life that didn't include her. It would destroy her completely. What would I do without you? He said, looking genuinely shaken. You'll find someone just as competent, she replied. But no one is you, Laurel, he said, his voice breaking slightly. You're perfect. For me. Knowing you manage things gives me peace. She tried to remain strong. She tried not to cry. I'm only your secretary, Mr. Collins, she said gently. He stood up, walking toward her. Secretaries manage the office. They keep the books. They run things when the boss is out. But you manage me. Her breath hitched. If you change your mind, he said quietly, please let me know. She nodded, blinking quickly. I will. And with that, she left his office, her heart heavier than ever. But her mind was made up. It was either leave or break completely. Laurel sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone like it held the answers to her confusion. Her apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against her chest like a weight. Her thoughts replayed the events of the past few days, like a movie she didn't want to watch anymore. Collins was getting married. Not to her, and she was leaving. Still, her heart felt like it was splintering from the inside out. No matter how graceful she'd been, how calm her words sounded when she handed in her notice, the ache inside didn't lie. She had given her best to that job, and to him, and somehow it still wasn't enough. Feeling lost, she picked up her phone and dialed the one number that always grounded her. Her mother answered on the second ring. Laurel, is everything all right? She tried to speak, but the lump in her throat made it difficult. Mama, am I doing the right thing? Walking away from a good job? From someone I... Her mother was silent for a beat, then said gently, Follow your heart, my daughter. Your head knows numbers, but your heart knows peace. If staying there is hurting you, then walk away with your dignity. You are more than a secretary. Laurel felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Mama. Pray, rest, and trust God. Everything will be all right. That was all she needed. Her heart felt a little lighter. She had made the right choice. Monday arrived with gray clouds and a storm threatening to break through the Lagos sky. As expected, Collins didn't show up. Laurel, dressed in navy and heels that clicked with quiet authority, walked into the conference room and immediately sensed the tension. Mr. Andrew, Collins' second in command, looked like he hadn't slept all night. The boardroom was filled with key partners and directors. It was a kind of high-stakes meeting Collins never missed. And Andrew, he was panicking. Laurel, calm and collected as ever, handed him a neatly organized folder before the meeting started. Your notes, sir. I took the liberty of summarizing the agenda points and key deliverables. His eyes widened with gratitude. Thank you, Laurel. You're a lifesaver. The meeting began, and while Andrew stumbled over a few points, Laurel was there, passing notes, whispering clarifications, clicking through slides like she'd rehearsed it all. Because she had. She knew this company. She knew how Collins ran it. She knew everything. By the end of the 2-hour session, Andrew was exhausted but relieved. You carried this, Laurel, he whispered as they stepped out. Collins doesn't know how lucky he is. She gave a small smile. That's what I'm here for, or was. No sooner had she stepped out of the conference room than a swarm of co-workers surrounded her, eyes wide with curiosity. Laurel, is it true? The boss is getting married? Is she rich? Where is she from? When's the wedding? You must know everything. Laurel held up a hand, her face poised and unreadable. When Mr. Collins is ready to make an announcement, he will. It's his story to tell, not mine. She walked away with quiet dignity, ignoring the murmurs that followed. Some people mistook her grace for coldness, but the truth was, if she didn't build her walls high, her heart would shatter in public, and she refused to give anyone that satisfaction. Later that afternoon, she was at her desk updating the renovation schedule when a commotion at the entrance caught her attention. He was here, and with him was her. Laurel rose slowly and peeked down the hallway. Collins had his hand gently at the small of the young woman's back as he led her through the office, stopping occasionally to introduce her to the staff. Alice was stunning, the kind of beautiful that turned heads. Flawless dark skin, high cheekbones, long lashes, and that innocent charm that made her glow. Laurel understood now. Of course he loved her. Who wouldn't? But something gnawed at her the longer she watched. Alice's face remained mostly passive, uninterested even. She nodded through introductions, gave polite smiles, but barely engaged. Her heels clicked elegantly on the floor, her designer bag swinging carelessly from her wrist. She wasn't curious about the company, not about the people, not even about Collins when he turned to say something sweet. She responded with the bare minimum. Then they got to Laurel's desk. Alice looked at her for a long moment and smiled. Hi, you're Laurel, right? Collins told me so much about you. Laurel gave her a cordial smile. Welcome, Miss Alice. It's a pleasure. Alice leaned forward slightly. He said you helped find our new house and that you're overseeing the renovations. I just wanted to say thank you. Laurel was stunned. Our house? Alice continued. I'm going to be quite busy, so I'd really love it if you continued managing everything. I trust your taste. You're doing a great job. Laurel's smile froze. That was where the problem lay. At first, she had taken on the task because the fiancé was abroad. Now she was here. Why wouldn't she take over? Why would any bride not want to design the home she was going to live in with her future husband? And that's when it hit Laurel. She didn't care. She didn't care about the house, about the company, about Collins' world. She was here to wear the ring, enjoy the luxury, smile for the photos. But the real work, the real building of a home? She was leaving that to Laurel. Of course, Laurel said with another smile. I'll continue with the arrangements. Alice nodded, seemingly satisfied, then turned back to Collins, who was waiting with a soft smile. He whispered something to her. She barely nodded. Laurel watched them walk away together. And for the first time since Collins had returned from South Africa, she didn't feel overlooked. She felt chosen, just not publicly. Because no one trusted her with their home like Collins did, and no one overlooked her like he did either. And that was the most painful part of all. The wedding was just a week away when Alice flew back to Tanzania for her final dress fittings and pre-wedding rituals with her family. It gave Collins a small pocket of time to clear his workload and prepare for the honeymoon that would follow soon after. But as expected, the company didn't pause just because his personal life was on the brink of change. Laurel noticed the tension in his shoulders grow with every passing day. Meetings, site inspections, procurement deadlines. It was all pressing in, demanding more of him. And just like that, the long nights returned. Collins was at the office late, and more often than not, so was she. One particular evening, he walked past her desk at 7:42 p.m., files in one hand, takeout in the other. He paused, leaned against the doorway to her office, and tilted his head slightly. "Laurel, would you mind staying a bit later tonight? I'm trying to wrap up the contract sheets and the architects need those blueprints cleaned up." Laurel looked up from her screen, blinking against the light fatigue pressing at her eyelids. "Do I have a choice, sir?" A lazy smile crept onto his lips. "Not really." She gave a half laugh and nodded. "I'll stay." They worked well into the night. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound between them, apart from the rhythmic tap of keys and the occasional paper shuffle. He sat at his desk with his sleeves rolled up, jaw clenched in concentration, brows furrowed. She hated how handsome he still looked, especially when he wasn't trying. By the time the wall clock hit 11:03 p.m., they were done. Completely. Collins leaned back in his chair, exhaled heavily, and looked across the room at her. "I'm driving you home." She blinked. "Sir, no, it's too late and I can just grab a ride." "I asked you to stay," he interrupted gently. "I'll make sure you get home safely." She swallowed and nodded. "All right." The rain had poured that evening, wild, angry sheets falling from the sky like Lagos was being scrubbed clean. By the time they reached her apartment, the roads had flooded in patches and potholes disguised themselves as traps under the water. Collins parked in front of her building, his hands still on the wheel as she gathered her things. "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned to look at her. "You're welcome. Get some rest." She gave him a small smile and stepped out, but she didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the sky was clear again, but the roads bore the scars of the storm. Laurel almost slipped while climbing out of the taxi that dropped her at the office, her shoes splashing into a puddle that soaked the hem of her trousers. She caught herself just in time, heart racing. When she stepped into the office, she looked dull, rain-kissed, slightly disheveled, and distracted. She dropped her laptop on her desk, hung her bag on the side, and sighed deeply. "Rough morning?" She jumped at the voice and turned sharply. Collins stood by her desk, already dressed in his site gear, denim jeans, thick-soled boots, and a waterproof navy jacket. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms streaked with blueprints and ambition. "I thought you were going to be at the Lekki site today," she asked, trying to smooth her expression. "I sent Andrew," he replied. "I'm more concerned with the Victoria Island road construction. We've had too many delays, and if we don't meet that delivery, the penalty will be brutal." She eyed his gear. "Don't climb the scaffolding. That's not your job." He grinned and gave her a mock salute. "Yes, Mom." And with that, he was gone. Laurel returned to her tasks. She had emails to send, permits to draft, and supplier confirmations to chase. She buried herself in work, trying to ignore the flicker of worry that came with the memory of him walking out in the rain just days ago. She hated when he went to sites alone. At 11:16 a.m., her door flew open and Andrew burst in, breathless. "Laurel." She stood immediately. "What's wrong?" "It's Collins," Andrew mumbled, panic tightening his voice. "What about him?" He was in an accident." At the sight, a fall from the scaffolding, a bad one. Laurel's mind went blank. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. What? She whispered. I told him 100 times not to climb those things. Andrew continued, running a hand through his already messy hair. But he never listens. I don't know how bad it is, but the ambulance took him to Region General Hospital. I'm heading there now. I'm right behind you, she said without hesitation. The hospital was cold. Not in temperature, but in feeling. The sterile air, the whitewashed walls, the scent of antiseptic. It all pressed against Laurel's chest like 1,000 bricks. She and Andrew rushed into the emergency unit where 3 doctors stood, preparing for surgery. Laurel's eyes immediately darted to the stretcher being wheeled into the operating theater. Mr. Okoro? She asked, heart thudding. A doctor in scrubs looked at her and nodded solemnly. Yes, he's still breathing. Honestly, it's a miracle. The fall was from 2 levels up. He broke both legs and fractured several ribs. There was some internal bleeding, but we've managed to stabilize him. Laurel clapped her hands together in helpless despair and lowered her head. She didn't care that Andrew saw her tears. She didn't care about the nurses or the doctors or the wide-eyed strangers in the waiting room. The only man she had ever truly loved was lying on that bed, broken, and she couldn't do anything about it. This isn't fair, she whispered to herself. I warned him. I told him over and over not to do this. I begged him. Andrew gently placed a hand on her back, unsure of what to say. She pulled away and sat down, staring at the theater doors like she could will them open with her eyes. Hours passed. The surgery dragged on. Nurses came and went. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls from the office. Updates on deliveries. Even a text from Alice that she ignored. None of it mattered. All that mattered was Collins. It was evening when a doctor finally emerged, looking exhausted but relieved. He's stable, he said. The operation was successful, and he's going to need a lot of rest and physiotherapy. But he's alive. That's the most important thing. Laurel didn't know when the tears began again. They slipped silently down her cheeks. She nodded, whispered a thank you, and closed her eyes. She had nearly lost him. And suddenly everything else, the wedding, Alice, the resignation, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that he lived. 3 days had passed since the accident, and Collins had yet to wake up. Laurel had refused to leave the hospital, choosing instead to sleep on the narrow waiting bench outside the ICU. Her sweater bunched into a pillow, her heart curled around prayers she couldn't put into words. Every hour she checked in with the nurses. Every time the door opened, she leapt up, hoping it was news. Good news. It wasn't until the 3rd morning, at exactly 6:47 a.m., that one of the nurses approached her with a tired smile. He's awake, the woman said softly. Laurel stood so fast she almost lost her balance. Her knees felt weak, her mouth dry. Can I see him? She asked breathlessly. The nurse nodded. He's still drowsy and under medication, but yes. Laurel walked in slowly as though her steps could disturb the fragile miracle of his survival. The room smelled of disinfectant and the faint scent of citrus from the open window. Collins lay against white pillows, his face pale, but those familiar eyes, those intelligent, beautiful eyes, were open and tracking her every move. She stopped at the foot of his bed, not trusting herself to go closer. You, he whispered, voice raspy. Me, she said, trying to hold back the tears. You stayed? Laurel swallowed. I never left. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. That sounds like you. There was a moment of thick silence before she walked to his side, resting her hand lightly on the bedrail. Do you remember what happened? Yeah, he said, wincing slightly. I was told I thought I was a superhero. She chuckled, wiping a tear quickly before he saw. You scared everyone. I scared myself. Another pause. I called Alice, she said quietly. His eyes opened slowly again. You did? Yes, I figured she needed to know. He turned his head away slightly, and Laurel didn't miss the flicker of tension that passed through his face. She said, Laurel's voice faltered. She said she doesn't like hospitals, that she hopes you understand, and she wishes you a speedy recovery. He was quiet for a long while. That's Alice, he said at last, not looking at her. She has a lot going on. I wouldn't expect her to drop everything. Laurel's lips tightened. I'm sorry, sir, but how can you say that? How can someone claim to love you and not show up when you need them most? He turned to look at her, and she was startled by how tired he looked. Emotionally, physically, spiritually exhausted. She said, she can't face this, he said. She can't face life with a cripple. She told me that. And you know what, Laurel? I understand. She's young. She didn't sign up for this. Laurel's hands curled into fists at her side. So she just walks away? Leaves you here to recover alone? She wants to do right, Laurel, he said gently. But she can't. That's who she is. Laurel felt her breath hitch. Her heart stung. Not just for him, but for the realization of how deeply he had convinced himself that this abandonment was normal, acceptable. You're very forgiving, she said bitterly. When you love someone, he whispered, you try to understand them. You try to make room for their fears. Well, Laurel snapped softly, from everything I know, love doesn't die this easily. He turned sharply to look at her, something flaring in his eyes. Don't speak like that about Alice. And that was it, the final crack. The wall Laurel had built inside her heart for months collapsed in one quiet sob. She turned her face away, but her shoulders shook, her tears falling freely. Collins stared at her, stunned. Laurel, are you crying? She covered her face, trying to stop, but the emotion clawed its way out. I don't understand how someone could love you and not be here. I could never do that. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Loud. It was the kind of silence that demanded honesty. Colin's voice came low, unsure. Laurel, does that mean you've changed your mind? About traveling? About leaving? She looked at him, eyes swollen and red, and her lips trembled as she struggled to form words. You are my world, she wanted to say. Without you, I'd be lost too. But the words stuck in her throat, too big, too raw. She swallowed and stepped closer. I will stay with you, she said softly, voice thick with emotion. As long as you need me, Mr. Collins. He stared at her for a long time. Then with the faintest smile tugging at his lips, he said, Then you have a job for life, Laurel. She laughed through the tears. I think I just got promoted. He chuckled, then winced, his ribs reminding him of the cost of bravery. Careful, I'm broken. But not beyond repair, she whispered. Their eyes held for longer than they should have. Something passed between them, something that was no longer wrapped in secrecy or unspoken hopes. Laurel reached for his hand, hesitated, then gently held it. He didn't pull away. That night she stayed beside him long after visiting hours ended. The nurses let her sit in the chair near his bed, and when he finally drifted to sleep, she watched his chest rise and fall, steady and sure. The beeping machines, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, the world beyond the window, all faded. This was her world now, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because this was where her heart had always lived. And as Collins slept, surrounded by machines and wires and soft monitors, Laurel made a quiet promise to herself. She would be here. She would be the one who stayed. Collins had barely spoken all morning. The nurse had come in to change his bandages, and he'd barely winced. The physiotherapist had stopped by to discuss the new session schedule, and he'd only nodded. Breakfast had arrived, untouched. He just stared at the tray as though chewing would take too much strength. It was unlike him. For days he had fought bravely, through the pain, through the worry, through the embarrassment of not being able to lift himself from the bed without help. But this morning something in his eyes had dimmed. The fire was gone. Laurel noticed it immediately when she arrived, her tote bag swinging from her arm, a light smile plastered on her face. She had brought a few documents from the office for him to review. Standard contracts, a pending invoice. a new supplier list. She knew he liked to keep busy. Work gave it purpose. But when she stepped in and saw the way he lay, back against the pillows, eyes on the ceiling, expression blank, her heart dropped. "Good morning," she said gently. He turned to her and gave a faint smile. "Morning." She placed the documents on the bedside table. "You look like you didn't sleep well." "I didn't," he murmured. She nodded and sat in the chair beside him. She didn't press, not yet. She had learned something in the past few days. Sometimes silence was more comforting than 1,000 questions. A few minutes passed. Then, finally, he spoke. "Alice came to see me." Laurel's fingers paused in the middle of organizing papers. Slowly, she looked at him. "She had lunch with me here," he continued, voice low and void of emotion. "Brought food from that fancy Lebanese place in Ikoyi, the one she loves." Laurel said nothing. She waited. He chuckled without humor. "She said she'd thought long and hard about everything. About us, about what she wants, about what she can live with, and what she can't." A lump formed in Laurel's throat. "She said she met someone else," Collins continued, his voice trembling slightly. "A friend from Tanzania. Someone who makes her feel light," she said. "And that it wouldn't be fair to marry me out of pity or obligation." Still, Laurel remained quiet. And then, he swallowed hard. "She said she couldn't be with a disabled man, that she couldn't picture a life where I'd have to learn to walk again, where maybe I never would." Laurel finally blinked, but her lips didn't move. "She wished me healing, said she'd always care about me, but she was sure. The wedding is off." Silence. Thick. Unbearable. Collins turned to face her, searching for anger, judgment, anything. But Laurel only nodded slowly and said, "Okay." He frowned. "That's it. Okay?" She met his eyes. "There's nothing else to say. If she truly loved you, she wouldn't have left." He looked away. "She said she tried. She didn't try hard enough." There was a beat of silence, and then, "I didn't want to tell you. I thought maybe I could process it first. But when you walked in, I just felt tired of pretending I'm okay." "You don't have to pretend with me," she whispered. And she meant it. From that day on, Laurel became everything. She brought the office to him, neatly arranged files, filtered emails, and decisions he needed to make. She printed, summarized, explained, and filed. She knew what would overwhelm him and what would bring him small joy. Every document had a sticky note with her handwriting. Every decision came with options she'd already weighed. She became his bridge to the outside world. But more than that, she became his strength. She was there every morning, long before visiting hours officially began, with a flask of warm ginger tea. She helped him sit up, gently adjusted his pillows, sometimes read aloud to him when his headaches grew too strong to read himself. And when the physiotherapist came in, she stayed, watched, encouraged. "Come on, Mr. Okoro," she'd whisper with a teasing grin. "You don't want your staff hearing that you couldn't finish one set." He would glare, then try harder. When he fell back on the mat after his third session, sweat coating his brow, she was there to wipe it away and mutter, "You're still stronger than most men I know." He hated needing help, but he didn't hate her help. That scared him. One afternoon, 2 weeks after Alice's visit, he stared at Laurel as she rearranged a stack of reports beside his bed. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but her hair was pulled back in a bun, exposing her smooth neck, and her glasses had slid slightly down her nose. She pushed them up with her finger and murmured something about contractor rates. And all he could think was, how could I have not seen her? How had he overlooked the woman who had been by his side for years, who held his chaos together like her heartbeat depended on it? She looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she asked with a soft smile. He hesitated. "You're very good at this." "At being a secretary," she teased. "At being everything." She smiled again but didn't respond. "Why are you still here, Laurel?" he asked, voice more vulnerable than he meant it to be. "You said you wanted to travel. to see the world. I changed my mind, she said simply. Why? She turned to him, eyes soft but steady. Because right now, my world needs me. He looked down, unsure how to respond to that. She continued before he could speak. I don't expect anything from you. I'm not waiting for a reward. I'm here because I care. Silence settled between them again. Not awkward, just heavy with emotion. You do know, he said slowly, I didn't mean to overlook you. She gave a sad smile. You didn't have to mean it. You just did. He closed his eyes, shame crawling over him like a cold wind. I'm sorry. Laurel reached for his hand and held it gently. I forgave you long before you ever hurt me. Collins felt something shift in his chest. This woman, this quiet, brilliant, loyal woman, was teaching him what love looked like. Not roses or candlelight, but presence, steadiness, strength, and soft-spoken support. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel broken. He felt seen. The sterile walls of the hospital had seen Collins Okoro at his lowest. The once vibrant, ever-in-control CEO had been reduced to needing help to sit, to eat, to breathe without pain. But he refused to let it end there. When the doctors first told him that walking again might be impossible, something inside him cracked, then hardened. He wasn't ready to be written off. Not by the world, not by Alice, and certainly not by himself. Collins remembered the physiotherapist's words clearly. We won't lie to you, sir. It'll take months of painful progress, and there's a chance you may never fully recover. But each time he lifted his leg an inch off the bed, each time he gritted his teeth through a set of stretches, he felt something return to him. Not just strength, but choice he could give up, or he could fight for the man he used to be. He chose the latter. Laurel was there through it all. Every morning she arrived before the nurses, sometimes with a tray of tea, sometimes with the kind of smile that made even pain seem small. She watched him sweat, wince, curse, and collapse. But she never looked at him with pity. Only pride. You're doing amazing, she'd say between jokes from the office. I'm not even sure our site workers can move this fast. He'd grunt, glaring playfully at her. They don't have broken bones. Excuses, Mr. Okoro. Excuses. Her laughter made him try harder. Her presence made the hard days bearable. He couldn't explain it, but she gave him courage. And when the news of his broken engagement finally became public, splashed across gossip blogs and whispered in boardrooms, Laurel was still there. She never once brought it up, though she saw every headline. Billionaire CEO dumped by model fiancé after tragic accident. But he saw it in her eyes. Not judgment, not curiosity, just quiet understanding. When the day of his discharge came, Collins expected to return to his bachelor apartment in Ikoyi. He hadn't thought much about the house he bought for Alice. It was just another painful reminder. He figured it was sitting somewhere, half renovated, gathering dust and regret. But as the hospital doors opened and the staff wheeled him toward the car, Collins noticed something strange. His chauffeur wasn't heading toward Ikoyi. Laurel? He asked as they turned toward Victoria Island. She smiled innocently, seated beside him in the back seat. You'll see. Laurel, he narrowed his eyes. What did you do? She folded her arms, playful. Nothing, just taking you home. But my apartment is in... Shh. She pressed a finger to her lips. Relax, sir. Just trust me. Collins muttered something under his breath, amused but suspicious. They drove for 15 more minutes, winding past bougainvillea-lined streets and waterfront mansions until they stopped at the tall black gates of the house, the one he'd bought for Alice. His heart thudded. The gates slowly opened, revealing a newly paved driveway and a garden glowing with golden lights strung between the trees. The flowers were in full bloom, and the lawn was trimmed to perfection. Even from inside the car, he could see lanterns on the porch and light pouring from the windows. Laurel, why are we here? He asked, breath catching. She leaned closer. Because you don't need to keep living in yesterday, Collins. You bought this house to start a life. So start one, for you, Not for her. He was wheeled inside and stopped short. The interior had been transformed. The marble floors gleamed. A large sectional couch faced a wall-mounted TV. The library he loved was fully stocked with shelves of new and old titles. The kitchen gleamed, smelling faintly of cinnamon and something that reminded him of home. Every room had life. It felt lived in, but not worn. Loved. He was speechless. "Laurel," she shrugged. "You signed off on the final renovations weeks ago, remember? I just took the liberty to finish everything and personalize it. You deserve that much." He was wheeled into the master bedroom, now bathed in soft cream and olive hues. The bed was made, the curtains tied back, and soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers. He whispered to himself, "This woman is too much." "What did you say?" she asked, stepping beside him. He smiled faintly. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." In the days that followed, Collins's home became a quiet sanctuary for healing. Therapy sessions moved into the sunroom Laurel had converted for that purpose, and soon he was learning to walk with the aid of crutches. Each painful step felt like a triumph. Laurel stayed by his side through it all, part nurse, part assistant, part best friend. She ran the office from the new home too, setting up a small workstation in the study and liaising with Andrew when needed. She cooked sometimes, made fresh juice, and filled the house with music and soft chatter. And somehow, despite the circumstances, Collins started smiling again. One evening, after an intense therapy session where he managed to walk from the sunroom to the garden patio with no assistance, they sat outside under the stars. Laurel had just finished folding a blanket around his legs. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, "the world expected me to fall apart." She looked up from her cup of tea. "Did you?" "I almost did." He turned to her. "But you didn't let me." She smiled softly, saying nothing. "I bought this house for someone who walked away when I needed her most," he continued. "But now I wake up in it and I feel peace because someone else made it feel like home." He reached for her hand, just briefly, and squeezed it. "Laurel, I need to ask." She looked at him, heart fluttering. "Why haven't you left?" She laughed under her breath. "I think I answered that question the moment I moved your couch and had your kitchen painted." He smiled again. "I don't deserve you." "No, Mr. Okoro," she whispered, eyes shining. "You do. You just didn't see it before." And in that moment, Collins Okoro, the man who once commanded boardrooms and cranes, realized he had overlooked the greatest gift of all. Not ambition, not status, not beauty, but presence, and love that didn't shout but stayed. It was a faithful evening, the sky smeared with soft strokes of lavender and peach, and the house felt unusually quiet. Laurel had just finished organizing the dining area and was headed to Collins's room with his tea when she noticed him staring into the garden, the lights reflecting off the glass door beside him. He didn't speak at first, just watched the trees sway gently, his hand resting against the armrest of his wheelchair, his jaw tight. "Tea," she said softly, setting the cup beside him. He turned to her then, eyes filled with something deeper than the usual fatigue or gratitude. "Laurel," he said slowly, "I want you to move in." She blinked. "Excuse me?" He leaned forward. "This house, it's too big and too quiet. And when you're not here, it echoes. The walls talk to me, and not in the way I like." She gave a nervous laugh. "Collins, that's not a good idea." "It's the best one I've had in weeks," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're always here anyway. This will make it easier, for work, for everything. I feel better when you're around." She shook her head, pacing. "People will talk. Your staff will talk. What do we even call it? A live-in secretary?" He smiled. "You know that's not what you are. Not anymore." She stopped, the air still between them. "Laurel," he said again more softly now. "Please, just say yes." She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't just asking because of convenience. He was asking because somehow she had become his light in all this darkness. And though her heart screamed in protest, warned her of getting even deeper into something she couldn't name yet, she said yes. A week later, she moved in. It wasn't grand or formal, a suitcase and 2 boxes, a toothbrush beside his in the guest bathroom, her laptop now on the table across from his. And from that moment, something shifted, gently but surely. There were mornings she made him laugh over burnt toast. Evenings they sat in silence, just listening to soft jazz and letting the presence of each other speak. Their rhythms merged seamlessly, 2 people who, without planning it, had become each other's routine. And Collins, though still recovering, felt like he was living again. Then came the morning he took a risk. Laurel had gone to make breakfast, humming softly in the kitchen. Collins stood by the edge of his bed, gripping the crutches tighter than usual, and dressed himself. Not sweats or loungewear, but a crisp shirt, tailored trousers, and clean cologne. When Laurel returned with the tea, she dropped the tray at the door in shock. "You're dressed," she gasped. "I'm going to the office." "You're what?" He grinned. "If I don't leave this house soon, I'll lose my mind." Laurel laughed through her surprise. "I actually think that's a great idea." She rushed to grab his blazer, already energized by the thought. "Your workers will fall over themselves when they see you," he chuckled. "I hope not. I'd like to keep the accident quota at 1 per year." The ride to the office was quiet but warm. His chauffeur, already informed by Laurel, said nothing but beamed in the rearview mirror. Collins glanced at Laurel more than once during the drive. Her calm, her excitement, her quiet confidence. It was anchoring. When they pulled up, the building stood as solid as ever. Collins had feared it would feel foreign, like time had moved on without him. But instead, it felt familiar. Home. Inside, the moment was electric. Employees gasped, paused mid-task, some even whispering prayers when they saw him, wheeled through the hallway, Laurel by his side. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder, her other hand giving subtle nods and waves. And then came the real surprise. For him, nothing was in disarray. The front office hummed like clockwork. Documents were where they should be. Staff moved with purpose. New hires who didn't even know him nodded respectfully, clearly aware of who he was. And everywhere he turned, Laurel's influence echoed. In the meeting room, Andrew greeted him warmly. "Boss, you have no idea how good it is to see you." "Looks like you've kept this place afloat without me," Collins said, trying to suppress his awe. Andrew grinned. Laurel made that possible. That became the theme of the day. Every corner he checked, every department he stepped into, someone credited Laurel. She told us exactly how to handle the delay in procurement. She recommended a system that improved delivery timing. She handled that board meeting like a pro. Collins sat in his office afterward, just staring at his desk. Laurel had adjusted the filing system slightly. Better. His emails were color-coded, his schedule was optimized, and beside the desk a vase of white lilies, his favorite, sat freshly arranged. She walked in with a report. "These need your signature." He stared at her like she was a stranger he was just meeting for the first time. "Laurel," he said quietly, "you did all this?" She looked confused. "It's your company. I just held it down." "You didn't hold it down," he said. "You ran it." She shrugged, trying not to blush. "You trained me well." He shook his head. "No, you did what I didn't even know needed doing." He looked around, truly taking in the space, the flow of the day, the confidence of the staff, even the renewed energy in Andrew. "You gave this place life again," he said, more to himself than to her. Laurel sat down across from him, finally relaxing. "They needed to believe that we could still function even if the boss was down. So I made sure they never had a reason to doubt." "You're incredible." She smiled. "You're the one that built all this, Collins. I just didn't want it to fall apart." He looked at her then. Not as an employee, not even as the woman who had cared for him like no one ever had, but as someone he could no longer imagine this world without. That night back at the house, Laurel helped him settle into the couch after a long, fulfilling day. She brought him a blanket, some juice, and sat beside him with her legs tucked beneath her. "You did it," she said with pride. "We did it," he corrected. They watched TV for a bit, not saying much. The air was peaceful, the way it always was around her. He turned to her suddenly. "You know, I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For saving my company." She smirked. "It was never dying." "I mean it," he said, voice low. "For saving me." Their eyes met. And though neither said the words, everything shifted. Love was no longer hidden between meetings, whispered in prayers, or buried in acts of service. It had moved in, and it wasn't leaving. 5 months had passed since the accident. 5 months since Alice walked away. 5 months since Collins Okoro lost everything, and then found everything he didn't even know he was missing. By now his steps, though supported, were firmer, his laughter deeper, and his heart a little lighter. The house no longer echoed with loneliness. It was filled with the kind of quiet companionship that soothed rather than overwhelmed. And Laurel, his steady, brilliant Laurel, was still by his side, navigating his life with the same grace she ran his empire. She was no longer just his secretary. She was his home. One afternoon, as they sat on the patio sipping hibiscus tea, Collins turned to her with a glint in his eye. "I've been thinking," he said, stretching his recovering legs out gently. "That's never good," Laurel teased, smiling behind her cup. "I want to go away." Her brows lifted. "Go away?" He nodded. "Just us. You've held me up for months, Laurel. You've carried the weight of my world, and I want to give you peace, a break, a reward." She laughed. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Laurel hesitated, knowing travel with his condition would require effort, patience, and meticulous planning. But when she saw the hope in his eyes, she nodded. "Okay, where?" He grinned. "Maldives." The planning took 2 weeks. Laurel arranged everything: the flights, the accessible suite, the private boat transfers, even a local guide trained in assisting with mobility. She made sure every step of the journey was seamless. And when the day arrived, Collins watched her glide through airports, hotel receptions, and speedboat docks like she was born to do it. "God really knew what he was doing when he made you," he muttered under his breath. Laurel, ever composed, only gave him a side smirk. "Remind me to add travel logistics to my resume." Well, no, Maldives was a dream. Their overwater villa shimmered under the sunlight. The ocean stretched in every direction like a moving painting, and the scent of salt and fresh orchids filled the air. They went snorkeling. Well, she did, while he cheered from the boat. They did a spa day together, ate exotic fruit, laughed like they were teenagers on holiday. And every time Collins doubted himself, Laurel reminded him how far he'd come. She never made him feel like a burden. She made him feel like a man. On their last evening, Laurel had helped him dress in a deep navy shirt and soft beige trousers. She wore a flowing burnt orange dress that made her skin glow under the golden light. "You look..." "Wow," Collins said, blinking slowly as she adjusted her earring. She smiled. "You clean up well yourself." They arrived at the restaurant just before sunset. The table was on a private deck overlooking the water. Candles flickered. A violinist played somewhere in the background. The staff greeted them with such warmth, Laurel briefly wondered if Collins had slipped them a tip ahead of time. He had. The dinner was slow, indulgent, delicious. But it wasn't the food she remembered. It was the look in his eyes. "Laurel," he said suddenly, placing his cutlery down and turning his full attention to her. She looked up, startled by the seriousness in his tone. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've held in for far too long." She set her fork down slowly. Collins reached across the table and took her hand. "I've thought about this moment for weeks. How I would say it. When. But there's no perfect time to tell someone you love them." Her breath caught. "I do," he continued, voice trembling slightly. "I love you, and not because you stayed. Not just because you saved my company, or cared for me when I couldn't move, but because I finally see you, and I don't know how I didn't before." Tears welled in her eyes. "I used to think the accident was the worst thing that ever happened to me," he said. "And the heartbreak? God, I thought I'd never recover. But now, I think it all happened for a reason. God used that to clear the noise, to show me the treasure I had been blind to all along." He stood slowly despite his discomfort and walked around the table with his cane in hand. Then he knelt, halfway, and opened a tiny velvet box. Laurel gasped. "No, not a proposal," he said, laughing through his own nerves. "Not yet, but something close." Inside the box was a delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant. "Will you be mine?" he asked, gazing up at her. "Officially. Will you be my girlfriend?" Laurel covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She nodded. "Yes, of course. Yes." He slipped the necklace on, and she leaned into him, their foreheads touching as the ocean sang behind them. Later that night, back in their villa, they sat hand in hand on the deck, watching the stars. "You planned all of that?" she asked, still in awe. He grinned. "Every single detail, with help from the staff, of course." "I didn't think you had it in you," she teased. "I was saving it for someone worth the effort." She sighed, resting her head on his shoulder. "To love," she whispered. "To being loved back," he added. And in that moment, with the waves dancing beneath their feet and the moon casting its silver blessing upon them, Laurel Adams knew this was the man she had always prayed for. And finally, he had chosen her too. Chapter 10. Home at last. The moment the plane touched down in Lagos, everything shifted again. Their Maldives escape had been perfect, timeless, sunlit, healing. But Laurel knew that love was always truly tested in the reality of home. Back in the city, back at the office, back to routines and people who always had something to say. But this time, things were different, because they were no longer hiding. The drive from the airport was quiet, calm. Collins held her hand gently in the back seat, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, as if to remind himself this was real. Laurel sat close, her head occasionally resting on his shoulder, the soft hum of Lagos traffic around them like background music to their new beginning. When they arrived at the house, the staff was already aware. Collins hadn't hidden it from anyone. Laurel was his woman now. And she walked through the front door, not as the girl who used to quietly type away at the corner desk in his office, but as the one who knew every part of his world and was now in his heart too. At the office, the whispers started the moment they both showed up side by side. Laurel looked confident, poised in a soft blue dress and low heels. Collins, walking slowly with his cane, but with more dignity than ever, stood beside her as they moved through the glass doors. Heads turned, eyes widened. Andrew was the first to approach. "Boss, Laurel." He gave a knowing smile but said nothing more. Collins didn't offer any formal announcement, just looked around the open space and said calmly, "Carry on." That was it. But it was enough. The office buzzed all day, but everyone respected them. Laurel had earned that. They didn't see her as the boss's woman. They saw her as the woman who ran the company when the boss couldn't. And now, as someone standing tall beside him, she held her place proudly. Later that evening, back at the house, something felt different. Laurel was finishing her tea in the kitchen when Collins called from the hallway. "Laurel?" "Yes?" He walked toward her slowly, gaze soft but steady. "You've been sleeping in the guest room." She blinked. "Yes." "Don't." She stared at him. "I mean it," he said. "Move in, properly, into the master bedroom. With me." She took a slow breath. "Collins, we're already living together. You're already in my heart, in my life. Why are we pretending we're still tiptoeing around each other?" He took her hand. "Come to bed. For real. Stay. Always." Her heart thundered. "Are you sure?" He leaned down, kissed her forehead, then whispered against her skin, "Laurel, I'm already yours. I don't want to sleep another night without you next to me. She nodded, barely, softly, but it was all he needed. That night, in the warm silence of their shared bedroom, they undressed slowly, like worship. It wasn't rushed. There were no fireworks outside, just moonlight flooding through the curtains, soft jazz humming from the speaker, and two souls finally giving in to what they'd longed for all along. Collins kissed her like a man who'd waited his whole life to find home. Laurel touched him like he was something sacred. He whispered her name like a prayer, breathless, reverent, overwhelmed. And when they finally became one, fully, tenderly, completely, it wasn't lust, it wasn't even passion. It was love. It was slow, deep, mind-crushingly beautiful. It was two people healing together in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled under the sheets, skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. Collins looked at her in the dim light, his fingers drawing lazy circles on her back. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," he murmured. "I used to wonder why life broke me, but now I know. It was to bring me to you." Laurel's eyes brimmed with quiet joy. "And I've always wanted you. I just never thought I'd be the one you wanted back." He kissed her again, slow and warm. "You're not the one I wanted back, Laurel. You're the one I want forever." Collins Okoro had never been a man of drama, but when it came to Laurel, he wanted every moment to be unforgettable, especially this one, the proposal. The idea had come to him one quiet morning, watching her make coffee, barefoot in his shirt, humming some soft tune. Her hair was up, her skin glowing in the early sun. That was when he knew for sure. This woman was his forever. He wasn't going to wait. Not anymore. And this time, he wanted to give her a moment she would never forget. Something so meaningful it would tell her everything he felt without needing a single word. What made it even more perfect? He had been secretly working with his physical therapist, and now, after months of sweat, pain, and prayer, he could walk again, without the cane, without the chair. Not for miles, no, but enough. Enough to stand tall and walk to the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. It was a miracle he'd kept it from her, especially since she noticed everything. But this secret, he had guarded it with his life. He'd picked a quiet rooftop restaurant with a garden terrace overlooking the Lagos skyline. He told her they had a formal dinner with a client, an excuse she believed only half-heartedly. She'd been suspicious for days now. The constant phone calls he ended abruptly, the knowing glances from his staff, the strange energy in the air. She didn't say much, but her eyes narrowed every time he said, "It's nothing, baby." What Collins didn't expect was Alice. It was 2 days before the proposal. He had just finished reviewing floor plans when his gatekeeper buzzed the intercom. "Sir, a Miss Alice is here to see you. She says it's important." He froze. Laurel wasn't home at that moment, and Collins had long stopped thinking about Alice. But something inside him whispered, "Face it. End it. Completely." He told the guard to let her in. She walked in wearing a modest gown, her hair braided and her face bare. There was no makeup, no airs, just the soft guilt in her eyes. "Collins," she began. He stood, leaning lightly on his desk. I'm not here to cause problems," she said quickly. "I just needed to say sorry." He stayed silent. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I let fear guide me. I walked away from a man who never wronged me. And I thought I was choosing freedom, but I only chose regret." He inhaled slowly. "Alice." She held up a hand. "You don't have to say anything. I can see it in your eyes. You're happy. You've moved on." "I have," he said gently, "and I've forgiven you. Long ago." Tears welled in her eyes. "She must be amazing." "She is." Alice nodded, eyes shimmering. "Take care of her, Collins. She's lucky, but not as lucky as you." She left quietly, and for the first time since the accident, Collins felt something fully settle inside him. Closure. 2 days later, the evening arrived. Laurel stood in front of the mirror in a dark emerald dress, her skin glowing against the silk. Her curls framed her face, her lips glossed, her gold earrings catching the light. "You're really going to a dinner meeting looking like that?" she teased him as he walked in. "You're my secret weapon," he replied with a wink. "Let's go." When they arrived, the restaurant was empty. Candles flickered, fairy lights danced across the terrace, and soft music played in the background. She turned, slowly suspicious. "There's no client, is there?" "Nope," he smiled. He motioned for her to sit. The view of the city behind her made her even more radiant. They were halfway through dessert when the soft music stopped. Laurel looked up, confused. That's when she saw him push back his chair and stand, without the cane. Without help. Her eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth. "Collins," he smiled through emotion, walking slowly, but confidently, toward her. She rose from her chair, tears already falling. "I've waited months to do this the right way," he said as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Laurel Adams, you saved my life without even trying. You stayed when others left. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You gave me purpose, joy, peace, and love." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant gold ring with a single dazzling diamond, just like her, brilliant without being loud. "Will you marry me?" Laurel was sobbing now, both hands over her heart. "Yes," she whispered, voice cracking. "Yes, yes, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, holding her as tightly as his healing body allowed. People emerged from hidden corners, staff, a photographer, even Andrew, who cheered from the sidelines, and clapped joyfully as the couple embraced. That night, they returned home full of laughter and love. Laurel couldn't stop looking at her hand, at the man beside her, at the story God had written with so much beauty and grace. She leaned into his side, voice soft. "Do you know how long I prayed for this?" He kissed her temple. "Not longer than I prayed for you to say yes." Their kisses turned deeper, hungrier. But this time it wasn't just passion. It was a promise. Their lovemaking that night was even more powerful than their first. It was slow, intentional, filled with sighs and laughter and awe. It was divine, something not of this world. Every kiss, every caress, every whisper felt sacred. He made love to her like he had been waiting his whole life to find her. And she held him like she never wanted to let go. When they lay tangled under the covers afterward, breathless and full of joy, Collins whispered against her shoulder, "Thank you for being patient, for choosing me." She smiled, heart full. "Thank you for finally seeing what was always right in front of you." And in that moment, there was no more pain, no more past. Just love, pure, patient, and finally, forever. The day came like a dream wrapped in sunlight. Laurel stood before the mirror in a stunning ivory gown, soft lace trailing over her shoulders and down her back. Her hair was in a beautiful updo, held by golden pins shaped like tiny leaves. Her skin glowed like morning dew, and her smile was the kind of quiet joy that only years of waiting, hoping, and finally being chosen could birth. She had always believed in love, quietly, secretly, even when life tried to convince her it wasn't hers to have. But today, she was walking into forever. Across town in a modern suite bathed in light, Collins stood tall in a sharp black tuxedo, adjusting his cufflinks with calm hands and a heart that raced. No cane, no chair, just him, whole again, healed and beaming. He stared at his reflection and thought back on everything. The accident, the betrayal, the despair. Then he thought about her, about Laurel, about the woman who had loved him in silence and saved him without trying. "God," he whispered, blinking back the fullness in his chest. "Thank you for everything I thought was loss. It was really grace." The wedding was intimate, just family, a few close friends, and colleagues who had watched their love blossom like a miracle. The garden venue sparkled under fairy lights, petals lined the aisle, and the air smelled of jasmine and home. When Laurel stepped into view, every head turned. But Collins nearly lost his breath. She walked slowly toward him, bouquet in hand, her eyes fixed on his. And when she reached him, he took her hand like it was always meant to be there. "You're everything," he whispered, voice thick. "You're my answered prayer," she replied. The vows were simple, honest. He promised to never take her grace for granted. She promised to never stop believing in him. They sealed their vows with a kiss that sent soft cheers echoing across the garden. And when he whispered, "Mrs. Okororo," into her ear, she giggled like the girl who had once sat outside his office door, secretly in love with a man who never knew her heart. Until now, the reception was laughter and music and dancing. Collins danced carefully, slowly, but joyfully. Every now and then his eyes found hers, and nothing else mattered. Speeches were made, tears were shed, and then under a canopy of stars, Collins pulled Laurel aside. He looked into her eyes and said softly, "You were never just my secretary. You were sent to be my miracle, my peace, my reason." Laurel reached up and touched his cheek. "And you were the man I prayed for every night, even when I didn't have the words." They kissed again, slow and full of gratitude. And in that moment, nothing else in the world existed but them. 1 year later, the company was stronger than ever. Laurel, now officially the head of operations, ran things with her usual brilliance and calm. Collins walked freely now, still cautious but strong. His scars, both inside and out, reminded him of grace. Their home was filled with laughter, the smell of Sunday stew, and quiet jazz floating through the halls. And every morning, before she made coffee and he left for meetings, he would kiss her on the forehead and say, "Thank you for waiting for me." And she'd reply, like always, "You were always mine to wait for." Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.